Wes du har min friend and welcome to yet another video, and it is time for the weekly awards of the biggest pile of donkey manure on television. And once again, the Rings of Power wins! Oh yes, sound the trumpet, my dear friends. Have you seen the latest episode? Well, if you haven't, please go and check out my review of that said TV show episode and you will know why it is the most important thing I have seen on TV in, nearly 20 years. And why? Well, I think that it's time to remind some of you of why this shouldn't exist in the first place and why it is an insult to Professor Tolkien and every reader who has ever read his books. Now, of course, there are many shells and normies and people on the internet who are using this argument. But it's fantasy, so anything goes. And it's an adaptation and creators are allowed to have creative liberties. Peter Jackson broke the law too. Wrong, and wrong. So the fantasy, so anything goes, that's not true. Simply no, because if you've ever read any good fantasy story if you've ever written some fantasy story, you know that there are rules within that universe. There are rules within the secondary world. Secondary world being a word that Tolkien used for a made-up fantasy fictitious world, whereas the primary world is our real world, the reality. And ideally, according to Tolkien, those two worlds should not meet. They shouldn't be connected in any way. And that's one of the reasons why he didn't really like C.S. Lewis's Narnia. Because you could get from the primary world to the secondary world, either by a wardrobe or a train or whatever. So there are rules, of course, within that particular universe. And these particular primary worlds also have their own politics from time to time, such as A Song of Ice and Fire. But this does not mean that, for instance, The Song of Ice and Fire, or the Game of Thrones show, or House of the Dragon, should contain an allegory to the primary world's politics. And people should learn to start to understand this. But of course, not everybody can understand these things because not everybody has the same cerebral capacity. Not everybody has the same IQ. Not everybody can think and understand things the same way. But it is quite understandable. But that's why you have me. Now, the second argument. It's an adaptation. No, this is not an adaptation. There have been great adaptations of books in the past. The Lord of the Rings by Peter Jackson is the prime and chief example of it. He adapted The Lord of the Rings into 3 epic movies, and of course there have been many changes, and I have been repeating this in my videos 1,000,000 times over and over again. Yes, he took creative liberties. He omitted things, he added things, he skipped things, he changed things a little bit. And then he, of course, tweaked some characters or characterizations of some characters, the prime examples being, for example, Faramir or Aragorn. But he kept the law, he respected the law, he kept the quote-unquote message, he didn't mess with the legendarium. It is quite clear that it is an adaptation of a story. You can clearly see the story there. And the main and chief and prime points are present in the films. Now, on the other hand, the Rings of Power by Amazon is not an adaptation. If you've seen the 6 episodes that have been released so far, you know that this is 100% completely new invented story, an original story written by the screenwriters and showrunners of Amazon. And so are all the characters, all of them. Not only the original characters that have never appeared in the books, such as, and once again I have to say that I refuse to use the proper pronunciation of the names as if Tolkien wrote them, because they've got nothing to do with Tolkien. So, for instance, Arondir, or Bronwyn, or Halbrand, who's really a 50-50 made-up character because he's really Sauron. Or Adar. But if you look at characters like Galadriel by Amazon, and she is like the textbook example of a messed up character written for the show, just bearing the name of Galadriel. She is the most annoying television character I've seen on TV in ages. She is absolutely insufferable. You just want to slap her. Well, that's just what a lot of people think. Now, as far as the story, well, the latest episode was about the creation of Mordor. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine that? What they did? So they really, and that is my gripe. That is the biggest gripe I have. This has got nothing to do with Tolkien and Baz's name, and Baz the name of the Lord of the Rings. Can you just shut up and enjoy? No, because I've got a bit of, a bit higher IQ than you. That's why I'm not satisfied with every piece of flashing image that I see on telly. It doesn't make any sense. They absolutely... And we can't even talk about disrespecting or breaking the law here, because this is no law. No law of Tolkien's. This is new, invented law that's got many plot holes and doesn't make any sense. And if we want to connect this bloody show with Tolkien somehow, it can only be done by the name. So just listen to my summary now. Very brief one, very short one, of what happened in the latest episode. We got to know that the Adar character is not in fact a dark elf, but is one of the first orcs that were created by Morgoth. So he's really an orc, a twisted elf, really, that was transformed into an orc by the first Dark Lord, and Adar himself even calls himself Uruk, an orc. Right. And some of you might be arguing this way, but we don't know what the first orcs looked like. Maybe they looked like some sort of transition between an orc and an elf. Okay, fine. So we have established that Adar is a transitioning elf. Fine, good. If you want to call him like that, please be my guest. And then, of course, we get to know that he served Sauron for a little bit, but he really didn't like Sauron because Sauron was too mean to his Orcsies. And he loves his Orcsies because they call him Daddy. Adar. Alright. So, a transitioning elf hates his former master because he was mean to his Orcsies. And he wants to provide his Orcsies with land because, literally, orc lives matter. Fine, good, why not? So he is in pursuit of a handle of a sword that in the past, I suppose, belonged to Sauron, because it's a key. Literally, this handle of a sword is a key. It was just by a very strange chance that Arondir was standing right behind, or in front of, the portal and the statue that depicted the broken handle. So we could at least get to know a bit of this mystery box. Okay, so we've established that it's a key. So during the attack on the made-up Tir Harad, when very conveniently the Númenóreans came in the vein of the Rohirrim during the Battle of the Pelennor Fields, very quickly, very swiftly, as if they were able to teleport. So they arrived with their huge fleet of 3 ships, where they were able to store hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of horses. And they helped the Southerners defeat the army of Adar and his Orcsies. Fine. So Adar saw what was going to happen, and he gave the handle of the sword to a random ugly dude and ran away. Galadriel pursued him, of course, the Adar. She apprehended him. She interrogated him. But in the meanwhile, this ugly dude literally put a broken handle into a keyhole, turned, and Mordor was created. Udun. Now, there are two instances of Udun in the Legendarium. The first one is really Utumno. It's just another word for it, which was a stronghold of or a dungeon, like where the first Dark Lord dwelt, Morgoth. And the second one is an area in the north of Mordor. So what we could see is, or was, that there was a dam that broke and water got out, and the flood got into a volcano, and that caused the eruption of the volcano, which then started annihilating the surrounding area and thus created probably Mordor. So they created the origin of a desolate land, which really should have looked the way it looks in The Lord of the Rings, because of the dark influence of the Dark Lords that dwelt there. So, what do you think about that? What do you think about this absolutely made-up history that Amazon created? And they, of course, they had the pact, the deal with the Tolkien estate, which says that they cannot contradict the lore or the events that will come later. They have done that many times in those 6 episodes. But I suppose that after Christopher Tolkien died, and Simon Tolkien is like the main advisor and consultant in the show, and he's a Judas who has admitted that he has never wanted to live in his grandfather's and his father's shadow. He sold his soul, he sold his grandfather, he sold his father for 30 pieces of silver. And I think that it's just my guess that the law can be broken now. That the deal has been changed. And as Darth Vader say, we should pray that the deal will not be changed any further. So this is why I despise the show. This is why I'm quite militant in this case. Now, I have been a part of many fandoms in my life. I still am. I'm a comic book fan. I have been reading comic books my entire life. I've been a Star Wars fan my entire life, a fantasy fan my entire life, a science fiction fan my entire life. And one by one, my favorite, as they like to call it, franchises and IPs, just stories, I like to call them stories, have been annihilated by Hollywood and by the wokies of the Hollywood. And I was able to just clench my teeth and shout sometimes into the world my dissatisfaction and just stop consuming the new material and just keep enjoying the old material. And Tolkien was the last straw. They came for Tolkien, they will lose. And that's what it is. Alright, let me know in the comments down below what you think, my friends, and that will be all. Thank you very much for watching, and Namarie.